I stood in the middle of the lavish reception hall, rice still in my hair and my new husband Mark's arm around my waist, when my phone buzzed with a text from my old attorney friend. Helen, the marriage license was never filed. The officiant was paid not to record it. This wedding is legally a sham. My stomach dropped like a stone. I stared at the screen while Mark laughed with his mother Victoria across the room. She gave me that cool, superior smile she always did. My name is Helen Whitaker. I am 52 years old. I had just married into one of the richest families in town, or so I thought. I built my little bakery from nothing after my first husband passed. Now it felt like everything I owned had just been stolen with a smile and a kiss. Before I could speak, Victoria swept over, patted my cheek, and whispered, "Welcome to the family, dear. Everything is handled." Mark squeezed my hand tighter. My knees went weak. The music kept playing, but my whole world had gone silent. They had turned my dream wedding into a legal trap, and I was the only one who didn't know. The lights twinkled above us. Guests clapped and cheered. I forced a smile so no one would see the panic. My hands shook as I slipped the phone back into my purse. 20 years of mixing dough at 4 a.m, scraping by, and finally making the bakery mine. All of it felt gone in one afternoon. Victoria's perfume was too sweet and heavy. Mark leaned in and kissed my cheek like everything was perfect. I wanted to scream, but the words stuck in my throat. How could they do this on the happiest day of my life? The cake sat untouched on the table. I thought of the vows we had said only hours earlier. They meant nothing now. Victoria raised her glass to toast the new family. I nodded along, but inside a quiet fire started to burn. I knew I had to find out everything they had done. The music swelled louder. My heart pounded harder. This was not the end I had planned. As they danced and laughed, I stood frozen. The betrayal cut deep, but I told myself I would not cry in front of them. Not yet. The night was just beginning, and so was my fight. Back at the honeymoon suite that night, still in my wedding dress, I showed Mark the text. He barely blinked. "It's just paperwork, Helen. Mom said it protects the family assets." Victoria had already wired my bakery into their family trust, while I thought I was signing normal marriage forms. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands shaking. 20 years of early mornings and late nights at the bakery, gone in one afternoon. Mark poured champagne like nothing was wrong. I smiled weakly, letting him think I was in shock. But inside, I was already planning. Then Victoria knocked on the door with a thick folder of new bank statements. My name was nowhere on them. My life's work now belonged to the Langfords. The suite smelled of fresh flowers and expensive sheets. Mark handed me a glass and smiled like he had done me a favor. I took it but could not drink. Victoria stepped inside without waiting for an answer. She wore her usual perfect dress and pearls. "Just some details to make things official," she said sweetly. I stared at the papers. My bakery account numbers were there, but the owner line now read Langford Family Trust. My fingers trembled as I turned the pages. How had I missed this at the signing table? Victoria patted my shoulder like I was a child. Mark nodded along, saying it was all for our future. I kept my face calm, but my mind raced with questions. The champagne glass felt cold in my hand. I slipped my old business checkbook into my purse when they were not looking. I needed proof. Victoria left with a satisfied smile. Mark turned on the television like it was any other night. I sat there in my white dress, feeling smaller than ever. The room was beautiful, but it felt like a cage. 20 years of hard work wiped away with a few signatures I never understood. The clock ticked loud on the nightstand. They thought I was finished. They thought I would just accept it. But as I lay awake beside Mark, the first real spark of fight grew inside me. This was my bakery, my life, and I was not going to let them take it without a war. The honeymoon night stretched long and empty. That same night, I waited until Mark fell asleep, then quietly opened the folder Victoria left. The trust papers clearly showed I had signed over the bakery, thinking it was part of the family merger. The marriage license was still blank. My heart raced with the first spark of real anger. I remembered Victoria insisting the officiant was a family friend, and rushing the paperwork. As I put everything back, Victoria's voice came through the door. "Still awake, Helen? Some brides just can't relax." She smiled like a shark. But when she turned away, I saw the date on one email she left open on her tablet, 3 months before the wedding. They had planned this long before I said I do. The suite was dark, except for the small lamp on the desk. Mark breathed steady and deep. I turned the pages slowly so the paper would not rustle. My name was on the trust, but it gave away all control to Victoria and Mark. The blank marriage license made my stomach twist. I thought back to the rehearsal dinner when Victoria had hurried the officiant along. Now it all made sense. My hands shook as I closed the folder. Victoria's knock made me jump. Her voice was smooth and knowing. She stepped in for a moment, eyes sharp. When she turned to leave, the tablet screen glowed with that old email date. 3 months. They'd been planning while I picked flowers and tasted cake. The anger burned hotter now. I waited until her footsteps faded down the hall before I let out a shaky breath. The hope of fixing this mixed with fresh hurt. They had counted me out long ago. I copied the email date in my mind. This was proof. I slipped the folder back exactly where I found it and crept into bed. My body felt heavy, but my mind was wide awake. I lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking of every early morning I had spent at the bakery. Now they wanted to erase me. But I was not erased yet. The suite was silent again, yet I felt the tension in every shadow. Tomorrow I would start fighting for real. The clock glowed soft. Sleep would not come easy, but the plan was already forming. The next morning, Victoria announced we were protecting the family future by moving my bakery accounts into a trust only she and Mark could touch. Mark hugged me and said, "It's for us, honey. Don't make this ugly." I nodded like the grateful new wife they wanted, but I had already slipped my old business checkbook into my purse. At the bank, the teller's face told me everything. My accounts had been quietly restructured weeks earlier. I walked out numb. Then my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your new husband isn't the only one who lied." I stared at the screen in the parking lot, heart pounding. Someone else knew the truth. The morning light streamed through the tall windows of the Langford mansion. Victoria spoke with that calm, rich voice of hers. Mark kept his arm around me the whole time. I nodded and smiled, playing the part. But my old checkbook felt heavy in my purse. I excused myself after breakfast and drove straight to the bank. The teller's eyes filled with pity as she showed me the new account setup. My name was gone. I walked out into the bright sun, feeling numb. The streets looked the same, but my world had changed. Then the unknown text lit up my phone. I stopped in the middle of the parking lot and read it twice. Who sent this? My hands shook. Mark had seemed sorry last night, but now doubt crept in. I deleted the message fast and drove back slowly, thinking hard. When I pulled into the driveway, Victoria's car was already there. I took a deep breath before going inside. They were waiting in the living room, faces calm like nothing had changed. Victoria poured more coffee. I sat down and tried to act normal, but my mind spun with questions. The text burned in my thoughts. Was Mark playing both sides? Or was someone else watching us? I kept quiet, letting them talk about future plans with my bakery. Inside, I felt the walls closing in. But that unknown message gave me a tiny thread of hope. Someone out there knew the truth. I would find out who. The afternoon stretched long, and I promised myself I would not break. Not in front of them. The fight was getting bigger, and I was ready to follow every clue. I met attorney Rachel Dunn in a quiet diner the next day, hands shaking as I slid the trust papers across the table. She read them once and looked up. "This is fraud, Helen. The marriage was never legal, and these documents were signed under false pretenses. We can unwind everything." For the first time since the reception, I felt power, but as I drove home, Mark called, voice tight. "Mom's furious you left the house. She says if you fight this, we'll cut you out completely." The threat hung in the air. I pulled over and cried, but I didn't turn around. The diner smelled of fresh coffee and pancakes. Rachel's voice was steady and kind. She took notes and promised to move fast. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. Her words gave me real hope. We talked for over an hour about next steps. But as I drove back toward the mansion, Mark's call came through. His voice cracked with anger. I pulled the car over on the side of the road and listened, heart heavy. I told him I loved him, but I could not let them steal my life's work. He hung up after more threats. The road ahead looked blurry through my tears. When I reached the mansion, the lights were on. I walked in slow, still sore from the long night. Victoria glared from the sofa. Mark stood beside her, arms crossed. I went straight to the guest room without a word. The door clicked shut behind me. I sat on the bed and stared at the wall. Rachel's hope mixed with Mark's warning. The family I thought I had married into was cracking apart, but I had proof now, and a lawyer on my side. I pulled out the trust papers again and read every line. This was not just about money. It was about respect I had earned over 20 years. The night grew late, and I knew tomorrow would bring more fights. Yet for the first time, I felt I might win. The unknown text from earlier echoed in my mind too. Pieces were moving, and I had to stay one step ahead. Mark cornered me in the living room that evening, voice low. Sign this release and we'll give you a fair 100,000. Don't, and the whole family loses. Victoria stood behind him nodding. I pretended to think about it, then asked to sleep on it. Later, alone in the guest room, I found hidden emails on Mark's old laptop between him, Victoria, and their lawyer planning the fake wedding months ago. The last one ended with Victoria writing, "Make sure Helen never learns the marriage isn't real until the trust is locked." My own husband had helped scam me on our wedding day. The living room felt too warm and too quiet. Mark's voice was threatening but calm. Victoria's eyes dared me to argue. I flipped through the pages slowly, hands steady even though my stomach twisted. I asked for time to think. They left the room satisfied. Later, alone, I opened Mark's old laptop. The emails popped up one after another. Dates, plans, even jokes about me being easy to handle. My heart pounded harder with each line. They had been counting me out for months. The last email from Victoria sealed it. I copied everything onto a thumb drive, fingers flying. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. I sat back and let the anger wash over me. They had lied to my face at the altar. They had planned this like a game. I thought of all the family dinners, the holidays, the times I had baked for them when money was tight. Now this. I closed the laptop and stared at the dark window. The thumb drive felt heavy in my palm. This was real proof. Rachel would know what to do with it. But Mark's name was on every email. My own husband. The pain cut deep. I wiped my eyes and told myself to stay strong. The mansion was quiet again, but my mind raced. Tomorrow I would take the next step. They thought they had won. They had no idea I was just getting started. The clock ticked past midnight. Sleep came in short bursts, filled with dreams of courtrooms and empty bakery shelves. But when I woke, the fire inside me burned brighter. I copied every email onto a thumb drive and drove to Rachel's office the next morning. She whistled when she read them. This proves premeditated fraud. We amend the complaint. Hope surged. That night, Mark's sister Anna slipped into the guest room alone, eyes red. I didn't want it to go this far, Helen. She started to say more, then Victoria's voice called from downstairs and she clammed up. Just think about the family, she whispered before leaving. The door clicked shut, leaving me wondering if anyone in this house was truly on my side. Rachel's office smelled of fresh paper and coffee. She read the emails and actually whistled. We talked for a long time about how strong the case looked now. She made copies and promised to file everything fast. I left feeling taller than I had in days. That night Anna showed up at my door alone. Her eyes were red and tired. She whispered that she never wanted me hurt. Then Victoria's voice called from downstairs and Anna stopped talking. She squeezed my hand and slipped away. The door clicked shut. I sat on the bed, heart aching. Her words sounded true, but the emails said otherwise. I wanted to believe her. But trust was broken. I turned off the light and lay there in the dark. The mansion creaked softly. Victoria and Mark were downstairs talking low. I could not hear the words, but the tone was angry. My thumb drive sat on the nightstand like a quiet weapon. Rachel had said we had a real chance. I held on to that. The next days would be hard, but I was not alone. Morning would bring the lawsuit filing. I closed my eyes and tried to rest. The bigger hurt was family. I whispered a small prayer for strength. Anna's face stayed in my mind. Was she trapped or part of it? The question kept me awake longer than I wanted, yet deep down I knew I had to keep moving forward. The roller coaster had started, and I was holding on tight. Tomorrow the papers would be filed, and nothing would ever be the same. The lawsuit was filed the following week. When the process server arrived at the Langford mansion, Mark's face went purple. Victoria screamed that I was destroying the family. I sat calmly on the couch while they raged, but inside I was terrified. Then Rachel called. The judge wants an emergency hearing. The fake marriage changes everything. My pulse hammered. The fight was finally real. The mansion felt electric with anger. Papers were handed over, and the server left without a fate word. Mark stormed out, slamming the door. Victoria glared at me from the hallway. I sat still on the couch, heart pounding. Inside, I was terrified. The Langfords had money and lawyers that could drag this out for years. But Rachel's call brought hope. The judge wanted to hear about the fake marriage right away. I hung up and took a deep breath. I went to the guest room and wrote down every detail in my notebook. The hearing could change everything. I pictured the judge listening to my side, hope mixed with fear. That night, the mansion was too quiet. I replayed the day in my head. The process server's knock still echoed. My bakery, my future, all hanging on what happened next. I knew the judge might see the truth in the blank license. Rachel sounded confident on the phone. I held on to her words. Sleep came late, filled with dreams of courtrooms and empty bakery counters. When I woke, the sun was up, and I felt ready. The hearing was set for 2 days later. I dressed carefully, choosing my best blouse. This was my chance to speak. Mark and Victoria would try to charm or threaten, but I had truth on my side. The roller coaster climbed higher. My hands shook a little as I made coffee. Anna passed by without speaking. The tension was thick enough to cut, but I stood taller. The fight had begun, and I was in it to win. At the first hearing, the judge looked stunned by the blank marriage license. Victoria tried to charm him. Mark interrupted with threats. I simply slid the email folder across the table. The judge's eyebrows shot up. For the first time, they looked small. But on the drive home, Mark texted me. Mom is moving the bakery deeds overseas tonight. You have to stop pushing. The roller coaster kept climbing. The courtroom was warm and crowded. The judge stared at the blank license for a long time. Victoria spoke smoothly, trying to win him over. Mark jumped in with angry words. I stayed quiet and slid the folder over. The judge's face changed. He asked sharp questions, and I answered clearly. Rachel nodded beside me. Hope filled the air. But on the drive home, Mark's text hit hard. I pulled over and read it again. My husband was warning me, but he still sided with his mother. The car felt too small. I drove the rest of the way with my mind spinning. When I got back to the mansion, Mark was on the phone, voice low. Victoria watched me from the sofa. I went to the guest room without a word. The hearing had gone well, but the threat of overseas deeds scared me. Rachel had said we could freeze accounts if needed. I called her right away and told her about the text. She promised to prepare papers for an emergency order. Night fell, and I could not sleep. The mansion creaked with footsteps. Mark's text repeated in my head. Was he helping me or setting a trap? I thought of the bakery where it all started. 20 years of work. I would not let it vanish. The next morning would bring more moves. The roller coaster kept climbing, and I held on tighter. I woke to find the house half empty. Victoria had already transferred my bakery equipment to an offshore account. Rachel met me at the courthouse with an emergency injunction. The judge froze everything within hours. Victoria burst into the hallway screaming I was a gold digger. But as we left, Mark's sister Anna mouthed I'm sorry when Victoria wasn't looking. The fight was getting bigger. The mansion felt cold and quiet when I woke. Boxes sat in the hall. Rachel met me at the courthouse steps. The judge granted the injunction fast. Everything was frozen. Victoria screamed in the hallway that I was greedy. Anna stood behind her, silent. But as we left the building, Anna mouthed the words, I'm sorry. The roller coaster kept climbing. I felt the wind in my bones, but worry followed close behind. We walked out into bright sunlight. Rachel squeezed my shoulder. Back at the mansion, Victoria slammed doors and yelled. I stayed in the guest room, heart pounding. The freeze meant they could not touch my bakery now. But the offshore part still hung over us. I called Rachel again that afternoon. She said the court would look into it. Evening came, and Anna knocked softly. She did not come in, just stood in the doorway. Her eyes were tired. I wanted to hug her, but the threat stopped me. Instead, I asked about her day. The moment felt fragile. Later, alone, I wrote everything down. The injunction was a big step, but the real fight was far from over. I thought of the bakery I had almost lost. Family should not feel like this, yet here we were. The night stretched long. I slept in short bursts, waking to check my phone. No new messages. The freeze gave me breathing room. I pictured the bakery back in my name. It felt possible now. The roller coaster had not slowed. It kept rising, and I was learning to breathe through the drops. Tomorrow would bring discovery, and more truths would come out. I was ready. Discovery began, and the lies unraveled. Bank records showed Victoria had been draining my bakery profits for years through fake family loans. I sat in the deposition room and watched Mark squirm. The judge ordered a full audit. That night, Victoria called, voice shaking for the first time. Helen, we can still fix this as family. I hung up, but my hands wouldn't stop trembling. The deposition room felt cold and bright. Mark's lawyer asked tricky questions, but Rachel shut them down. I answered every one with calm truth. Mark's face turned red when the old bank records came out. He shifted in his chair and could not meet my eyes. Victoria waited outside, pacing. The full audit meant every dollar would be tracked. I left the courthouse feeling lighter, but Victoria's call brought the weight back. Her voice had cracked. For once, she sounded scared. I sat on the bed and stared at the phone. Family. The word tasted bitter now. I thought of the bakery I had built alone, yet the emails proved how deep the betrayal went. I made tea and tried to steady my breathing. The mansion was quiet except for the clock. Mark and Victoria stayed in their rooms. I knew the next hearing would be harder. But the evidence was piling up like bricks on their side of the scale. My side felt stronger. I wrote notes for Rachel and went to bed early. Sleep came slowly. Dreams mixed courtrooms with empty bakery shelves. When I woke, the sun was up. The trembling in my hands had stopped. I felt steady again. The roller coaster had dropped, but I was still in my seat. Discovery was peeling back every layer. More would come out soon. I dressed and faced the day. The fight was mine to finish. Mark's sister Anna showed up alone at my temporary apartment, crying. Victoria forced him into it. She needed your bakery to cover their debts. She handed me a flash drive with more records. I hugged her until Mark banged on the door demanding she leave. The next morning, Rachel called. The judge is threatening to dismiss unless we settle fast. I chose to push harder. I stood in the small kitchen after Anna left, flash drive warm in my hand. The apartment smelled of fresh paint and takeout. Her words echoed. Victoria forced him. I believed her tears. But Mark's knock had been loud and angry. I locked the door and plugged in the drive. More emails, more proof. My heart lifted. Then the morning call from Rachel brought new pressure. The judge wanted a fast settlement. I told her we would push. No settling yet. The apartment felt too quiet. After that, I sat at the small table and thought of the bakery where it all started. 20 years. I could not let fear win. Afternoon light slanted through the blinds. I made notes for the next hearing. Anna's torn face stayed in my mind. She was caught between us. Night fell, and I cooked a simple meal. The flash drive sat beside my plate like a promise. Rachel's words rang clear. We had to decide. I chose strength. The roller coaster twisted again. Drops and climbs mixed together. I went to bed with the decision firm. Tomorrow the hearing would test us all. I whispered goodnight to the empty room and closed my eyes. The fight felt closer to the end, yet I knew more turns waited. My hands were steady now. Hope and worry danced together. I was ready for whatever came. In the next hearing, Mark swore I had known about the fake marriage. My old pastor testified the officiant was never licensed. The judge looked skeptical. Victoria tried to interrupt and was warned. The judge scheduled the final hearing. But as I left, Mark hissed, "You'll lose everything if you keep this up." The courtroom was warm and crowded. Mark's voice sounded smooth at first, but cracks showed when Rachel asked about dates. My old pastor spoke clearly, sharing notes from the wedding day. The judge nodded along. Victoria's outburst earned her a sharp look from the bench. I sat still, letting the truth work. When the judge set the final date, relief washed over me. We had more time to build the case. Mark's hiss followed me down the hall. His breath was hot with anger. I did not flinch. Anna waited outside, eyes down. She squeezed my arm once, quick and secret. We drove to my apartment in silence. The city passed by in a blur. I thought of the final hearing. Everything would come out then. Rachel called later to review notes. Her voice was steady and encouraging. I cooked dinner and ate alone, replaying the day. Mark's threat tried to scare me, but it only made me stronger. The apartment felt like a safe place now. I looked at the flash drive Anna gave me, more pieces for the puzzle. Night came soft and dark. I sat by the window and watched streetlights glow. The bakery would need me soon. I wanted to be there for it. But first I had to finish this. The roller coaster had leveled for a moment. The final hearing loomed like a big hill ahead. I breathed deep and told myself I was ready. Sleep came easier that night. The fight was mine, and I was winning small battles. The final hearing arrived. Rachel laid out every email transfer, every lie. Victoria's lawyer tried to call it a misunderstanding. Then the judge announced he was voiding the trust and reopening the bakery deeds. Gasps filled the room, but Victoria smiled like she had one more card left. The courtroom felt electric. Rachel's voice was strong as she presented each piece. Papers shuffled, and the judge listened closely. Victoria's lawyer fumbled for words. Victoria's glare never softened. I kept my chin up. When the judge voided the trust, the room reacted with surprise. Whispers spread. My bakery back in my control meant a new chance. I felt the shift. Rachel squeezed my hand under the table. We left the courtroom together. Victoria's smile worried me. What card did she have? Anna waited in the hall, face pale. She walked with me to the car. The drive to my apartment was quiet. I thought of the frozen money and the bakery waiting. It was not over, but we had won a round. Evening light faded as I reached the apartment. I made tea and sat with my notes. The judge's decision was good news, but Victoria's smile lingered in my mind. Rachel texted to say she would prepare for whatever came next. I answered and felt grateful. The night grew deep. I lay in bed thinking of the bakery days, the late nights, the dream I had built alone. Now it was almost back. Almost. Victoria's hidden card kept me awake longer than I wanted. The roller coaster had dropped again, but I saw the next climb. I closed my eyes and held on to hope. Tomorrow would reveal more. I was still in the fight, and I would see it through. Victoria's last card was a surprise claim that I had signed a full power of attorney the morning of the wedding. The signature looked exactly like mine, except I had been getting my hair done with no pen in my hand. Rachel demanded forensic analysis. That night, Mark's sister Anna called in secret. Victoria forged it. I saw her practicing. The motion hit like a cold wave. Victoria's lawyer presented the paper with confidence. The signature looked perfect. My stomach twisted. Rachel stood tall and asked for experts. The judge agreed. Tension filled the air while we waited. I sat still, mind racing back to the salon chair. I had been getting my hair done, no papers in sight. The courtroom stayed quiet until the judge set a date for the expert. I left feeling shaky but determined. Anna's secret call came after dark. Her voice was low and scared. She told me what she saw. Victoria at the kitchen table, copying my name over and over. I listened, tears in my eyes. My sister-in-law had crossed the line to help me. We talked a few minutes more. She promised to stay safe. I hung up and sat in the dark apartment. The forgery was real. Proof would come. Hope surged again. The roller coaster twisted sharp. Anna's choice meant everything. I made a note for Rachel and went to bed. Sleep was light, but my heart felt lighter. The next hearing would expose the lie. Victoria and Mark had gone too far. I pictured the judge's face when the truth came out. Morning would bring the expert. I woke early, ready. The fight had reached a turning point. My new family was breaking apart, but I was putting myself back together. The bakery, my life, they were coming back. I dressed and stepped into the day with new strength. The forensic expert confirmed the forgery in open court. Victoria's face drained of color. Mark tried to throw his mother under the bus. The judge's gavel came down hard. The trust was voided, my bakery returned, and I was awarded damages. I walked out with my head high. But the real storm was just beginning. The expert's words rang clear and final. The room went still. Victoria looked small in her chair. Mark pointed fingers, voice rising. The judge stopped him quick. Gavel struck and it was over. The bakery was mine again. Damages would cover what they took. I stood tall as we left. Rachel smiled wide beside me. Sunlight felt warmer outside. I breathed deep. But the wind brought new worries. Victoria and Mark would not quit easy. Anna met me in the parking lot. She hugged me tight. We drove to my apartment talking soft about the bakery. That night the phone stayed quiet. I sat with a cup of tea and let the victory sink in. The bakery dream was back in my hands. Yet I knew more battles waited. The storm was building. Money still had to flow back. Repayments were ordered. I made a list of next steps. Sleep came easier, but dreams mixed victory with warnings. Morning brought calls from Rachel. Papers needed signing. I dressed and went to her office. The real storm meant more court dates ahead. I felt ready. The roller coaster had peaked, but drops still waited. I held my head high anyway. This was my moment, and I would not waste it. The bakery waited for me to rebuild. Family ties were frayed, but I had truth and law on my side. The day stretched ahead full of work. I stepped forward, stronger than before. The money started flowing back. Victoria and Mark were ordered to repay every cent they took. I thought the war was over. Then a certified letter arrived. Victoria was filing bankruptcy to shield the family mansion. My hands shook as I read it. The fight wasn't finished. The bank statements came in the mail. I opened them at the kitchen table in my apartment. Numbers looked good. My name was back where it belonged. Relief washed over me like warm water. I thought the war was over. Then the certified letter came, Victoria's bankruptcy papers. She wanted to hide the mansion. My hands shook as I read. The war was not finished. Rachel called right away. We would fight this too. Anna came by later and looked worried. I hugged her and said we would handle it. Night fell, and I lay awake thinking. The mansion was nice, but it was bought with my bakery money. I would not let them keep it. The roller coaster had leveled, then dropped again. I made notes for the bankruptcy hearing. Anna's words from earlier stayed with me. Family was changing shape. I felt stronger with her support. Morning would bring more work. The money was mine, but the mansion fight loomed. I whispered to myself that I had come this far. I could go further. The apartment was quiet. I closed my eyes and held on to the win I already had. More justice was coming. The storm was not over, but I had an umbrella now. I slept deeper than I had in months. Bankruptcy court was brutal. Victoria's lawyer claimed she had no knowledge of the forgery. My evidence proved otherwise. The trustee looked at her and said, "This looks like an attempt to defraud your daughter-in-law." Victoria started crying on the stand, but Mark was still fighting every penny. The courtroom was smaller and colder than the last one. Victoria's lawyer spoke fast. I watched her face. When my evidence came out, the trustee's words hit hard. Victoria's shoulders shook. Tears ran down her cheeks. For the first time, she looked broken. Mark sat rigid, jaw tight. He whispered to his lawyer between breaks. The hearing stretched long. I answered questions clear and calm. Rachel sat beside me like a shield. When the trustee spoke against Victoria, hope rose again. But Mark's fight kept the tension high. We left the courthouse under gray skies. Anna waited in the car. She asked how it went. I told her the truth. We drove to my apartment quiet. The apartment smelled of fresh cookies she had baked. We ate them warm and talked about the bakery. Victoria's tears stayed in my mind. She had caused this, but seeing her cry still hurt a little. Mark would not quit. More hearings waited. I made tea and reviewed notes. The roller coaster twisted once more. Bankruptcy was a new hill to climb. I felt tired but steady. Anna's hand on mine reminded me why I kept going. Night came soft. I wrote a list of what I wanted back. The bakery, the rest of the money, peace. Sleep came with dreams of courtrooms and fresh bread. Morning would test us again. But I was not alone now. Anna was here. We would face it together. The fight continued, and I was still standing tall. Mark's lawyer offered a settlement. I could keep the bakery and $200,000 if I dropped all claims against Victoria. I refused. That same night, Mark showed up at my apartment begging me to help with their mounting legal bills. I closed the door in his face. The settlement offer came in a thick envelope. I read it at the kitchen table and shook my head. No deal. I called Rachel and told her. She agreed. That same night, Mark knocked on my apartment door, face pale. He begged in a low voice. Bills were piling up. I listened but said nothing. Then I closed the door gently but firmly. The moment felt final. I stood there in the quiet apartment and let the wind sink in. The bakery was mine to keep. No more compromises. I made coffee and planned the next court step. Night fell soft. I sat by the window and watched the streetlights. The fight was worth it. Family was healing in its own way. Mark and Victoria had lost more than money. I had gained back my strength. Sleep came easy. Tomorrow would bring more, but tonight I held peace. The bankruptcy trustee ruled against Victoria. The mansion was to be sold. I watched from the gallery as she realized her perfect life was gone. She looked at me across the room with pure fear. Mark's sister Anna squeezed my hand. She created this, Helen, not you. The trustee's voice was firm. Papers shuffled. Victoria's face went white. The mansion would sell. Her shoulders slumped. I sat still in the gallery watching every second. No smile crossed my lips. This was justice, not joy. Anna sat beside me and squeezed my hand and whispered those words. They landed soft. The hearing ended quick. We walked out into fresh air. Victoria passed us without looking up. Mark waited outside, car running. Anna and I drove to my apartment quiet. I made dinner while we talked about the ruling. Anna said again that Victoria made her own mess. I nodded. The mansion sale meant more money coming back, but it also meant they had nowhere to go soon. I felt the weight of it. Night came and I sat thinking of the bakery now fully mine. Numbers were climbing back. Victoria's fear stayed with me. She had looked so small. I did not hate her, but I would not forget. Anna came out later and hugged me. We sat together watching the quiet street. The fight had changed us all. I whispered good night and went to bed. Tomorrow the mansion sale papers would move forward. I closed my eyes with peace in my heart. The storm was ending. I had come through it. Mark came to my reopened bakery, hat in hand. Helen, we're losing everything. I showed him the thriving new online orders and the 2 employees I had rehired. His face went white. You started over without us? I simply nodded. The bakery smelled of fresh bread and coffee. I had set it up in secret during late nights. Mark stood in the doorway, hat twisting in his hands. His voice cracked when he spoke. I listened without anger. Then I turned the computer so he could see the new orders. Numbers looked good. His face drained of color. He stepped closer, eyes wide. You started over, he said again, softer. I nodded once. No long speech, just truth. He left without another word. The door clicked shut. I sat back and let the moment settle. The bakery was growing faster than ever. I had hired 2 people they had pushed out long ago. Work felt good again. Anna came by later. We laughed at the busy counters. The bakery felt alive. Evening light warmed the windows. I locked up and drove home thinking of Mark's white face. The roller coaster had one more slow turn. He saw now that I had not stopped. I had built while they fought. The numbers would keep climbing. Sleep came with a smile. The bakery was mine. I had taken back more than money. I had taken back my future. Mark's visit was a small victory. More would come. I closed my eyes and thanked the quiet strength that carried me through. Tomorrow the orders would grow again. I was ready. Victoria showed up next. Makeup streaked. I was only trying to protect my son. I listened, then slid the final court order across the counter, requiring her to vacate the mansion in 30 days. She stared at it, then at me. Please, Helen, we have nowhere to go. The bakery counter was quiet except for the hum of the ovens. Victoria's hands shook as she took the paper. Her voice had lost all its sharp edges. I listened to every word she said. When she finished, I slid the order over. Her eyes scanned it fast. The date was clear, 30 days. She looked up, eyes wet. The plea hung in the air. I did not speak right away. The moment stretched. Then I told her the sale was final. No more delays. She stood there small and broken. I felt the weight but stayed firm. She left without slamming the door. The bakery felt still after she went. I sat and looked at the new orders. Numbers kept rising. Anna called later, voice soft. We talked about Victoria's visit. Evening came and I drove home thinking of the 30 days. The roller coaster had slowed to a gentle stop. Victoria's fear was real now. I did not gloat. I simply moved forward. The apartment smelled of dinner when I walked in. Anna hugged me. We ate and watched the quiet street. The new house papers were almost ready. I would buy one soon with the judgment money. Peace settled in my chest. Victoria had nowhere to go, but that was her choice long ago. I closed my eyes that night with a clear heart. The fight was ending on my terms. No more games, just forward steps. Sleep came deep and restful. Tomorrow I would sign the papers for my new home. Life was turning around. I moved back into my own house, the one I had almost lost. The bakery numbers were higher than ever. Mark and Victoria were living in a small rental. I kept the business growing and watched the Langfords shrink. The house smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. I unpacked boxes and set up my kitchen again. The bakery emails came in steady. The 2 employees I rehired started right away. They were happy to be back. Orders poured in. Numbers climbed past what they ever had before. I sat at my desk one afternoon and just watched the screen. Mark and Victoria were in a small rental across town. I heard it from Rachel. No more big mansion, no more plans. The thought did not bring me joy, only quiet acceptance. Anna came by for dinner that night. We laughed at silly stories from the old bakery days. The roller coaster had leveled. No more big drops. I felt steady for the first time in months. The bakery was mine again, stronger. The house was paid for with money that belonged to me. Anna squeezed my hand across the table. "We made it, Helen." I nodded, throat tight. Night fell soft. I checked the bakery numbers before bed. Her small support filled the quiet house. I lay down and stared at the ceiling with a smile. The fight was over. I had won the right way. No shortcuts, no tricks, just truth and patience. The numbers would keep climbing. Family was healing slow. I closed my eyes and slept without worry. Tomorrow the business would grow more. Life felt full and good. Mark called at midnight, voice cracking. Mom's having chest pains from the stress. We're out of options. I listened to him cry for the first time. I told him I would cover her medical bills, but only if they both signed a permanent release giving me full ownership of every asset they had taken. No more games. The phone felt heavy in my hand. Mark's sobs came through the speaker. I listened without speaking at first. Anna stood beside me, nodding that it was my choice. When he finished, I gave my terms, clear and calm. He agreed through tears. We set a time for the lawyer's office. I hung up and hugged Anna. The house was dark and still. I sat at the kitchen table and wrote down the exact words for the release. No loopholes. Morning came fast. We met at Rachel's office. Mark and Victoria looked small in the chairs. Papers were read aloud. They signed with heads down. I signed too. The check for medical bills was handed over. Mark took it without a word. Victoria's eyes stayed on the floor. The meeting ended quick. I drove home with the late release papers safe in my purse. Anna rode beside me. We did not talk much. The house waited warm and bright. The roller coaster had one last gentle turn. Mark's cry stayed with me, but so did my boundary. No more games. The assets were fully mine now. Bakery numbers looked even better that afternoon. I paid the medical bill direct from the new account. Peace settled deeper. Night came, and I sat thinking of the long road. The fight was truly over. I had won on my terms. Sleep felt earned. They signed the papers the next morning in Rachel's office, heads down, pride gone. I handed Victoria the check for her hospital stay and watched them walk out. 2 people who had once looked down on me, now smaller than I had ever seen them. I drove home to my bakery, my house, and my life. I, Helen Whitaker, had taken it all back the right way, legally, patiently, and completely. And for the first time since that fake wedding day, I slept without a single nightmare. The office smelled of fresh coffee. Papers were signed in silence. Mark's hand shook a little. Victoria did not look up. Rachel witnessed everything. When it was done, I slid the check across the table. Victoria took it with both hands. They stood and left without another word. I watched them go down the hall. The door closed soft behind them. I let out a long breath. Rachel smiled and shook my hand. I drove home slow, windows down. My house came into view, sunlight on the roof. Anna met me at the door. We sat in the living room and talked about nothing important. The bakery numbers were up again. I checked them on my phone and smiled. Dinner was simple and warm. Later I sat on the porch and listened to the quiet street. 20 years of work had come full circle. I had fought fair. No shady moves, just truth and time. The bakery was stronger. My life was mine again. I lay down and pulled the covers up. Sleep came easy and deep. No wedding music, no angry voices, no nightmares, just rest. I, Helen Whitaker, had won. The end felt sweet and earned.